Wonderful. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, Learning from the Pros, the Future of B2B Sales and Marketing. I'm your host, Lois Mueller, a B2B strategist at xiQ, and I want to go into a few housekeeping items before we begin. We'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A channel at the bottom of your player, and we'll be answering your questions at the end of the discussion. Today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session and is accessible through registering on the website. And lastly, we encourage you to share this webinar with your social networks. And if this is your first time joining us for our webinar series, Learning from the Pros, I'd like to personally welcome you as well as give you a bit of insight on the series. This webinar is for fellow B2B visionaries, forward thinkers, and those interested in learning about the future of B2B sales and marketing. While account-based marketing is by no means a new concept, recent advances in technology have made ABM more achievable for organizations of all sizes. It seems as though B2B marketers and sellers are now in a race to acquire tools and expertise that help them stand out in an overcrowded and increasingly virtual world. But many don't know where to begin or where to invest their time and marketing dollars for the best ROI. So to provide some guidance and elaborate on the transformations that are taking place in the B2B environment, we are joined by Joel Harrison, who's the editor-in-chief at B2B Marketing, and Usman Sheikh, founder and CEO of xiQ. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for being here.
You're welcome. Lovely to be here.
Thanks, Lois. Thank you for having us.
Of course. And Joel, do you want to kick things off today by telling our audience a bit more about you and what you've been up to at B2B Marketing?
Okay, yeah, well, delighted to do that, Lois. So if you're not familiar with us, we're a membership organization, media company based out of the UK, but increasingly operating globally. We run a series of events called B2B Marketing Ignite. We have a B2B awards program, and we have 90,000 members around the world who talk about B2B marketing, who are dedicated to it, and all focused on being better, more successful, and more effective marketers. We help them by connecting together, producing content on best practice, engaging with people on all sides of that market, whether they are client-side marketers, CMOs, marketing execs, or agencies, or vendors, or channel partners. We operate and we try and connect the whole sphere. And it's a wonderful industry to be involved with. And it's been great fun for the last 17 years.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing with our audience a bit more about you and B2B marketing. And I think we'd like to also get your take on the very first question this morning, which is, what are some of the biggest changes in B2B marketing and sales that you've noticed specifically this past year?
Yeah, it's a great question. Change has been something which we've seen in the market. As I say, we launched as a magazine, and that tells you a lot about the change that we've seen since we started. And we've seen change accelerating over that period of time. To the point where it became the new normal. But then last year, it took an absolute quantum leap in the last 12 months, rather, and people had to embrace it and be bold as never before. That's been really great. It has been really stressful along the way, and people have had to, accept the level of stress that perhaps they hadn't encompassed before. But actually the positive level is led people to being more empowered, more agile, more progressive, investable, more respected. I think marketing and sales have had to work together more progressively and more collaboratively to achieve a better result. There's always that pressure, kind of built-in pressure to silo-wise, and what we've seen people had to do, given the pandemic, is to come together to work much better. And I think that actually what this has led to is actually marketing, particularly because marketing was less respected than sales was, actually being put in a more responsible position, being able to have more authority and being better respected in the organization. But it has genuinely been great for both sides. The move away from physical events not through necessity, but through necessity rather than desire, has made people innovate and require people to be more progressive and forward thinking and do things which they might not have done otherwise. So, in short, a period of loads of changes, too many to unpack, but it's really exciting and kind of it's shifted the whole industry forward in a kind of quantum leap.
Yeah, let me add to that, Lois, if I may. I think, Joel, you said something very interesting. You said that these were kind of slowly but steadily kind of moving in that direction, and the pandemic came and kind of forced it. It was a forcing function that kind of made companies start rethinking their strategy as well as their tech stacks. So I think that's really, really interesting. And you also mentioned that the events being taken off or in-person meetings. Um, Here's an interesting little fact about that whether it was a necessity or should it have been by design. So the stats are that 80% of buyers do not want to do business in person anymore. They haven't wanted to do business on in person. And we've seen this in many, many stats over the last couple of years where the buyer is doing all their research and preparing online and really kind of holding off to engage with the sales rep like right towards the end, right? Towards the end of the sales cycle. And so when Gartner has conducted these surveys, they come back and say 80% of the buyers don't actually want to be online. As a matter of fact, what the pandemic did is it shifted 70% of those who didn't want to meet in line, it shifted them perpetually into the virtual, right? And that's a whole, as we're going to talk about it, that's a whole different set of challenges that come along with it and opportunities actually that come along with that as well. Second thing, Joel, and I don't know what you guys are seeing, but the role of field marketing, which has been so critical in B2B selling, right? Where field is really teeing up the events, the individual kind of the personalized opportunities to meet and talk and discuss with clients. That's been totally disruptive. That's kind of total upheaval. No more events, no more congresses, no more summits, no more getting together in big buildings. Not to mention of the fact that most of the executives don't want to do it in the first place, right? So that's causing a lot of disruption in your traditional marketing to sales cycle, where marketing played kind of a day-to-day critical role in feeding lead or qualified lead information to their seller partners. That's gone, right? And lastly, I would say the big change, again, going back to what you said, that something that was kind of slowly coming about, but suddenly got thrust right in our faces, artificial intelligence, AI, right? And this had to happen. The amount of unstructured data that is relevant to sales and marketing cycles today is far greater than the historical data that I have about my clients and my CRM system. Let me repeat that, Joel. That's kind of really, really important, right? Unstructured data that resides outside my organization has much more value, much more actionable intelligence than the historical data I have about my specific individuals and clients that I've been meeting, right? And so, how do we tap into this unstructured data that's out there? That's really, and which has more intelligence, which has more insights, which has more leverages to kind of pull me into a sales cycle, right? And so you need this kind of intelligence capability. And I like to call AI augmented intelligence exactly for this reason. We use the word augmented instead of artificial. There's nothing artificial. What it is doing is it's augmenting what you have thought of as a key aspect of how you go about decision making. It's helping bring in a lot of this unstructured data and making sense out of it and helping you with a new set of things. So these are, in my opinion, Joel and Lois, the three big changes. Buyer's desire moved. Physically moved to virtual. Field marketing totally disrupted. That in turn, if you look at the value chain of how B2B runs, that's a major silo that's been taken out altogether. So how do we bridge that? How do we jump over? And then the amount of data that we should be really pulling in to help us make decisions. Yeah.
Usman, that's a really, really wise words. Do you mind if I come back there, Lewis? Is that right? Yeah. So I think your point about the power of AI only starting to become so much more apparent. I would certainly agree with that, and I think we're going to go and talk about that a bit later on. And and I think your point about the product marketers and the disruption in there and the redeployment of those people. We're seeing a lot of people in marketing teams being redeployed, skill sets being reevaluated. Now, whether that's temporary or permanent, I don't know. But I see I'm a content person, but I love events as well. And you're seeing the boundaries between those things blurring. What's content, what's events? Very, very hard to tell these days. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. It's a facet of just format, and it's about getting the right information to the right people available. The point around events. We're an events company. Well, we do a lot of events. We're not an events company. We do a lot of events. We love events. And events that takes all shapes and sizes. I had a round table for 25 B2B marketers this morning. That kind of level of intimacy is fantastic, where people are directly comparing experiences. And that's something that, we were doing that physically beforehand, and it's so much better to be able to do it digitally. Are we seeing the death of physical events? I doubt it, because I'm not going to suggest that Gartner's information is wrong, because Gartner are a very robust organization, but I completely, I'm sure they're right when they say people don't need to do or don't want to do that business face to face. There's still a value in face to face, a serendipity which you get in terms of people not knowing what they don't know. So, I don't think we're going to see face to face events die altogether. I certainly hope not, because I think it's that human experience which we all like. But I think I completely agree with you that their place in the mix has changed. The opportunity to do things in a more clever way are much better. The opportunity to augment them with technology, we're only just scratching the surface of that right now. So, I think that kind of interpersonal opportunities will only grow, but we've got no idea what it's going to look like yet, because we're at the start of a journey.
Yeah, I concur. Just one moment, Lois, before you kind of jump us to the next question. So I agree with you. Many years back, when on-demand broadcasting was coming into play, they predicted the demise of the movie theaters, right? That never happened. Well, that was round one about 10 years ago, when Netflix and everybody started coming in and started offering you home entertainment. It never happened. There is a desire to go to Vegas. There is a desire to meet people in person. I think that the social part, and one of the aspects of what the pandemic has done, is it's kind of left us really aching for that human interaction, right? So I think there's definitely there, but it's going to be a lot more cautious, and you've got to be a lot more clever in terms of how you get attention, how you attract. The last thing I'll say on that is probably your organization is actually very well suited for conducting those, because you're much more neutral versus a company that is trying to conduct its own virtual event, right? So how do you get people that you don't know there, whereas a neutral party that's kind of bringing thought leadership can probably have a much bigger advantage in that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point.
And then, gentlemen, to just kind of double click on this a little bit more, Joel, you talked about the level of intimacy that you are trying to find at your roundtable discussions, but might be missing from the day-to-day meetings and events that have been canceled. And like you, I truly hope that this is not the death of events, and I don't think it will be. But do you mind elaborating on some of the biggest challenges of remote working for B2B marketers and sellers that you've noticed, or that you feel is out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the surface level, there's two really obvious ones. The first one is, and actually we talked about this before the meeting started, around managing teams, with marketers, trying to run a collaborative team, be effective in terms of talking to each other, communicating together effectively. That is, there are a lot of companies out there, particularly I suspect who are from the technology sector, who've been doing this for a while. Other ones haven't, having to adapt really fast to this environment. Certain members of the workforce of the marketing teams are very well equipped and adapted to this, particularly the older ones who are more self-sufficient. Younger ones, more junior in their job, need a bit more support, more nurturing, more encouragement, and that's harder. So resilience has been a major theme in terms of the marketers we speak to, and how you manage that, how you build collective team spirits, how you galvanize people to achieve single objectives, how you manage people. So all that productivity, collaboration, technology and processes, which you can kind of cobble together if you're in the similar office, or if you see each other 2 or 3 times a week. It's much harder if you're 100% remote. So that's the kind of obvious one on an operational level. But when you think about the sales and marketing challenge, the obvious point, as we've just said, is that so much of what marketing did, for better or marketing and sales did, for better or for worse, was about physical interaction, a physical meeting at a location in the real world. Whether that was an event or a conference or a golf day, dare I say it, the golf day is still quite a big thing over here in the UK, or whether it was at a trade show or a meet, or just a one-to-one meeting. It was a really big thing that marketing and sales relied on, and that all of a sudden that to get removed was really challenging for people. And so what we immediately saw, what a load of our CMO members were saying to us, is that you had salespeople coming to them and saying, "Help. How do I navigate this environment? How do I operate in this?" Because if you can get through to someone, you can book a Zoom meeting with them, and it's probably going to be half an hour. It's not going to be an hour, and it's not going to be on their site. The opportunity for small talk and serendipity has gone. So how do you play that in the best possible way to get that engagement, that dialogue. And that's in a sales meeting. So you saw, that's where I think, to my point earlier on, you had sales, you had marketing helping sales in a way they hadn't done possibly before. And then, what do events look like? And, we're in the new, I think, without wishing to go on too much about events, we've moved from physical to virtual, and then there is definitely a degree of event fatigue setting in. So, those are the obvious things for me. And, I'm ready to know, Usman, how do you relate to those?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're all hands at this B2B game. At least I am. I can speak for myself. So, and up until last year, and even now, we hear this all the time. Sellers coming to us, top line sellers coming to us, and say, "Look, it's a high touch business. It's a high touch game." I have always walked the halls and the corridors of my clients. I've met them. I've had those water cooler discussions. I've walked into their offices. I've been able to look at the paraphernalia that's lying around their office to be able to assess who these people are, all in a desire to kind of better serve them, better understand their business needs, and better connect with them at an emotional level, right? So I think that's where the biggest light switch has gone off, right? And when you take that, when that light switch goes off, it's like we're at a party and suddenly the lights have been turned off. Now, you need some night vision goggles if you're going to have fun in that group, right? Otherwise, well, you could probably have fun in a dark room as well, entirely dark room, but you'd probably have more fun if you had the ability to have the only person who could look at what else is going on, right? So that analogy, transforming that analogy across into the B2B marketing and landscape is very apt. I think that's exactly what's happened. Travel, this was and we'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of skills and traits of individual, but travel is going to die down a lot in business travel. When travel dies down a lot in business travel, the kind of people that are attracted to the job is also going to change, because travel has been a major attraction for people in sales. We conduct classes with number of sales, very impressive sales universities, and number one thing says, I want to travel. I want to travel. Well, you got to rethink that. Video and virtual, totally transforming. And here's another thing, whereas it could be very good. Those people that have been in outside sales roles, walking the corridors, for them to transition into video can be a huge disruption. It sounds very simple. Hey, I used to walk, talk, press the flash. It was very easy. Go to that golf game. Okay, now those assets, so to speak, those opportunities have been removed. What do you do then, right? That's the empty chairlift example, right? That Lois is gone off skiing, but she doesn't have any clients to take skiing with her. So not that she doesn't have clients, because they don't want to go out. They can't commingle, right? So, and then lastly, something you said in your last point, Joel, which really, really kind of got my attention, was the blurring lines between content versus events, right? And I think that's the core. In this challenging landscape, how do you establish relevance and context? I think those are the two things that for B2B marketers and sellers, and you also mentioned the coming together of the two roles, and we should discuss that as well. But the key thing is how to establish that relevance. And this is where content today, and we were talking about imagery versus words and so on. This is, or video, images, words, that's the new vocabulary. Those are the lingua franca of the business world, right? So not everybody knows how to use them. And in these professional sales training schools, we're learning that students are actually being taught how to perform on video, right? That's fantastic. And so people that are not able to establish relevance, Joel, I think are going to have a very tough time. How do you see content and relevance playing a role within the transition, and how challenging is that in your opinion?
I mean, content's always been an absolutely critical part of the sales journey, but and it's gone. Actually, we had a conversation about this. I was on a webinar I actually did yesterday. I'm talking about this, and someone who works at Transmission, or an agency I know who are global, and I know in San Francisco as well. Saying about how you come from back in the old days when it was about battle cards and quite tactical things. Now it becomes quite structural and quite and there's quite a depth of resonance involved in it, and there's all kinds of challenges associated with that around getting sales to engage effectively with content and understand. And it's a two-way dialogue as well around, marketing teams are pumping out content for what's being used, and is the right stuff being used? Is the best stuff being used? In so many instances, it's not the best stuff being used. It's stuff that's often it's quite old and it's quite antiquated. It's not on brand, or it's not, up to date with the right information. But it's the stuff that individual has found works quite well. So this notion, as you're saying, that this increasing dialogue between sales and marketing to convince and coerce is probably the wrong word, but just let people know what's available and what's working, and get it findable as well at the right time, is really, really critical. And you're seeing industrialization of content in this way, and a lot of systems set up to do it. But it also requires both sides to be empathetic. It requires both sides to understand each other, to know when to have a degree of trust within each other, to go to marketing to take the insights back from sales, and for sales to say to marketing, I know you've created this for my benefits. How can I use it? How can it be most effective? And then there's a deployment angle as well. How do salespeople actually use content? Not just in meetings, but actually to build their own social brand. We had Tim Hughes in our roundtable yesterday, who's a global recognized social media advocate, and he would say that it's really important. But there's all kinds of aspects to it. So it's definitely becoming more and more important. And if sales is, if you think that your content gets created in a closed box without sales teams being involved, then that's kind of a crazy attitude to have. It needs to be increasingly collaborative.
Nice.
And so for the first two topics that we discussed so far this morning, it was about the changes and challenges in regards to the individuals, so sellers and marketers. But what do you find or feel is the impact of AI on marketing and sales?
I mean, again, it's a really great question. It's a fascinating topic. It doesn't seem very long ago to me that people were using AI as at the front of their marketing. We've got AI, and have you got AI on your platform? Oh, well, I better buy it then. It was the kind of like it was the be all and end all of their marketing, and just because it had AI, it made it different. And then it's become more of an ingredient brand. It's more like if you don't have it, it's a problem. It's the assumption that a lot of platforms are built on there, and there's probably a conversational tangent around the honesty about that. Some more legacy platforms probably make claims which they can't really stand up to. But I think so. We're seeing it increasingly everywhere, and its relevance is becoming increasingly universal. And I think it as Usman was saying earlier on, it becomes increasingly resonant. For me, the most kind of forefront opportunity is around the data, is around how you access, leverage, deploy, utilize data in the right way. The customer insight is where MarTech has kind of accelerated our the complexity of B2B marketing and the opportunities that are inherent in that. And there's all kinds of aspects to that. If you're operating at scale, you've obviously got more data you need to, in terms of scale of customers, you've got more data you need to crunch, so it's more of a challenge. So it kind of lends itself to that naturally. You're also seeing it in terms of just messaging and how you're sending messaging out, who you're targeting and when. And then there's things like, one of the obvious ways is that your website is your front door for inbound marketing. We're increasingly seeing brands moving away from the form as the first mechanism of communication. It's all about the AI-powered chatbot and what they serve you up, and what their first engagement is with you, and how they grab you. And that's the first line of engagement for brands. And so and it's all about as you were saying earlier on, it's all about enabling that self-driven journey of discovery of the buyer. And I think really, from my perspective, if you can imagine it, AI is delivering it. Wherever you are, in whatever challenge you're trying to address in B2B marketing, there is an AI solution, or someone is working on an AI solution that is going to open up the doors to possibilities.
Yeah, I think it's kind of very interesting, Joel. You would say that AI had become an overused term. Everybody, hey, do you have AI or not? It's just simply rubber stamp AI, whatever. And yeah, the other term I'd like to mention is account-based marketing, ABM, right? Everything that is in marketing today, whether you're prospecting, whether you're getting contact information, whether you're doing top of the funnel demand generation, everything in the kitchen sink is now being labeled as account-based marketing. We should actually talk at some point specifically about ABM as well, because I think the record needs to be set straight over there for many, many different reasons. And so I think we should talk about that. But coming back to AI, right? So we talked about in the context of what has changed, which is that establishing relevance in that darkened party room, right? So how do I stand out? How do I stand out within that, right? So AI, and as I said, we call AI as augmented intelligence. We see that there is a lot of data, and as I said earlier, a lot of data outside in social media networks, on news channels, on videos, on Twitter snippets. There's more relevant information and intelligence about your clients out there versus inside your CRM or your marketing automation system. And today, there are no traditional technologies that are able to convert and transform that unstructured data into insights. So AI or augmented intelligence, for example, xiQ, shameless plug over here, but we can pick up digital footprints of individuals and help predict how this person is going to make buying decisions. And based on those buying decisions, we help the seller become more relevant, establish that empathy, provide context. Second, we can feed and we can collect where these individuals are, what they're reading, what they're discovering, and use that intelligence to figure out when. There's a lot of things that are happening in companies: leadership changes, mergers and acquisitions, new product releases, competitive pressures. All those are trigger opportunities, which, one of the services that xiQ provides is we curate news on companies. A company like Google, for example, or a company like SAP generates about 150, on average, 150 news articles or sales triggers a day, right? So if I'm an account exec that's kind of trying to manage one account, even SAP, I got to go through 150 news, right, on a daily basis. Second, there's all the executive tweets. Third, there's my entire LinkedIn network that's out there. What am I going to do? Am I going to be researching this account, or am I going to be selling to that account, right? Primarily, my core training is in selling. Where is the research coming in? So this is where AI comes in. And the outcomes, Joel: speed, agility, intelligence, and empathy. We see these four words repeated all over the place. How do we actually make those tangibles? How do we drive speed, right? Can we take content, curate content at 1/10 the cost, 90% faster, and put it out in regular cadence? That's speed. What used to take you 6 weeks or 8 weeks to do, you can do in less than 30 minutes, right? And the agility that brings around. I can be a real-time enterprise. I can be having conversations with my clients on events that happened literally 2 hours ago. How's that? If I come in, because my augmented intelligence alerted me something is happening at B2B Market, reach out to Joel. And this is what you should reach out to him. That's going to put me in a different level. That's where augmented intelligence can come in and help. And by the way, doesn't hurt in a B2B environment where I need to come across as your solution partner for me to appear intelligent and plugged in, right? That's my biggest currency to my reputation, is how intelligent and plugged into the system am I? Because then I can leverage that information to earn your trust and empathy, the ever kind of present word empathy. I got to know you. If I don't meet you, I don't know you, right?
And that in turn has an impact on the skills base and the skills criteria for those salespeople, because they have to assimilate that information quickly and deploy it in a way that is confident and relevant, in a way that they wouldn't have done before. So I can tangibly see the opportunity, and everybody has to adapt to how they use that and how they make the best out of it.
Joel, another thing that we've noticed is that the best practices of sales makers have not really changed. They all do research. They have networks of people in the old days that used to provide them with those little insights, those water cooler discussions that got me information that I would not find anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So all those little tricks of getting prepared and kind of building in still hold true. It's just that your landscape, your framework of where you used to go to get that and how you used to get that information, what the traditional sellers were trained on and the marketers were trained on, that's not applicable anymore, because we are on a different playing field, right? We were playing football or soccer, as we like to call it in America, and now I'm going to give everybody a real curveball. We're playing cricket. Different set of rules, guys. Different set of skills, as you said, right?
Different shaped ball.
Yeah, different shape of the lawn, exactly, as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for that wonderful insight on AI transforming. And not to elaborate on that, but I heard kind of the answer to this question throughout the conversation so far. I know that Usman, you talked about how sales makers and marketers right now need to establish relevance. Joel, you talked about the ways that individuals have needed to pivot in order to adapt in this new virtual environment. So do you mind elaborating on or sharing with us some of the key traits you think the modern B2B sales maker has or should equip themselves with as soon as possible?
I mean, yeah, we've discussed a lot of them, but just to elaborate, as you say, on those, I mean, agility. I think we all have to be agile in today's environment, because what was worked yesterday isn't necessarily going to work today, let alone tomorrow. Pragmatism, also, just to accept our preconceptions may not be accurate or appropriate, and adjust to situations. Be unresponsive as well, so to being fleet of foot around those things. I think, Usman, you picked up on this something earlier on. Trustworthy, I think, is really important. So establish trust both as a brand and also as an individual. I heard a wonderful, and I think that the two things interrelate, but obviously on a personal brand level, it's very important to be trustworthy. And then this is similarly around kind of, I think it's just fascinating for me in the kind of the wake of the initial aftermath of the kind of the lockdown happening, certainly in the UK, where obviously I'm more tuned in. The need to be seen as being helpful, and we talked about being helpful in B2B for a long time. I think it was Jay Bauer who talked about being stop selling, start helping, and which is wonderful advice for everybody. But I think that became across particularly in a time of crisis. It's never been more truthful, but to be helpful in a really genuine, honest way, rather than kind of this sense of help wash, where you're saying you're being helpful, but actually you're not. You're just trying to sell something at the back door. And I do think that empathy, we've talked about it again, it's coming in now. That real genuine ability to understand what your customer is their situation, and to respond to that. It's easy to, and it's important to not mistake sympathy for empathy. I think empathy is really important because it has a deep level of genuine resonance in terms of understanding. And I think if you're talking about, I saw that, I wasn't sure if this question was for salespeople or marketers or both, but for marketers, I think one of the things that probably is really important going forward, and when I talk about this regularly when I do in-company presentations for our clients, is actually genuine commercial acumen. Marketers often don't have that as part of their makeup. Salespeople more often do, and it's just comes with the territory. Marketers, that often there's a creative background, which is great, and I believe in creativity as a key attribute for the profession. But sometimes that means that commercial is seen as a kind of something that's grubby and inappropriate. And I think that more and more what marketers need to do is to understand the commercial reality for your business and for your boss. You understand what environment they're operating in, and adapt your behavior and your responses and your expectations accordingly, rather than exist in an ivory tower. I think that the more marketing can do that, the more relevant it is in today's world, more than ever.
Yeah, I like those. I think you said a couple of words that really, really stuck out, and kind of key word that I took away from there was genuine ability, right? I don't know if there's actually even a word or not, but the ability to be genuine, right? And clients, prospects, sellers smell it, see through that in seconds. Okay. And that's the make or break. I think that is exactly it, right? We can put all the white papers on the need to become a solution partner, or how to be a partner and what empathy is. But if you cannot establish this word genuine ability with your or the trust factor with your prospect, you're lost. You don't even stand a chance.
Yeah.
And here, as I'm talking to you and I'm kind of thinking through this, kind of very nice. You also use the word pragmatic. right? So how do you approach pragmatic? And the question is regarding traits. So what does pragmatic mean in the context of marketing? Well, marketing is now a data science. It's no longer a creative ad agency, it's a data science. There's so much data available over there that in order for us to be pragmatic, today research and that data that's available, that user feedback loop that's available, is huge in helping us. We can spend very little time to get up to date on that and use that to actually become genuine as well as empathetic. Because what I heard you say with empathy was that, people can see through it, and it is a difference between sympathy and empathy. And empathy requires working at it, right? That's what you said. And so I fully agree with that. I fully concur. It's not, empathy is not something that comes up. And we have our barometers set at our emotional barometers set at different levels, right? The way I interpret you versus the way I interpret Lois could be two totally different ways of looking at it. So how do you kind of benchmark and bring those things into a level of normalcy so that I can actually, and people see through this. You get disingenuine emails and conversations all the time. And what do? Delete.
Yeah, and very quickly, Usman, obviously you make a really valid point there, and it's difficult because it's very, very easy to see through lack of genuine. As a journalist, I should know better words than that. But you're if it's someone's fault, you can see it. But at the same time, and you can see it on a Zoom call. But if someone is actually, but the other side of the coin is you're trying to build empathy, you're trying to build familiarity and trust, and that's much harder to deliver. So we're all working so much harder, and this notion of Zoom fatigue and Teams fatigue, where because you're sat there, you're having to pour so much of your personality and attention down this channel, and hope someone buys into it. It's very difficult. So I'm definitely not pretending it's easy or glossing over that, but so that's why all these tools that are available are helpful.
Right. And gentlemen, for this last question, it just might be one or two tips that you each would have for marketers and sellers that are listening. So Joel, we'll start with you. Do you have any advice or recommendations on how B2B marketers and sellers should better prepare for the future?
I think that a lot of what marketing, in terms of, we talked about the importance of empathy and kind of personalization around it, and I think a lot of what it will enable the future is what enabled the past, which is things like the right message to the right person at the right time. It's just, you've got to use different tools to get there. So I think in terms of kind of the kind of key things for the future, I think is to continue to be curious. Is absolutely critical. Make time to learn and to step outside your comfort zone and to understand what's going on out there. Take time to build your brand and to build your personal profile. That's really, really important, and to build your network, because these things are very, very powerful in terms of increasing your knowledge. Be commercial, but also I think these are omnipresent things. Is be passionate. If you can't be passionate about what you do in any sphere of life, you're never going to be very good at it. And I really believe that B2B marketing as a profession has never been more worthy of being passionate about than before. It's never been a more opportunist, richer with opportunities and potential for you to be hugely successful and have a very satisfying career. And so, I think those are the things that are crucial, and they haven't changed in many respects. Just the tools that they use to get there are different.
Yeah, fully agree. You use the term stop selling, start
helping.
So our tagline, for which, by the way, we won a B2B Content Award as well, was stop selling, start educating, right? And that kind of goes back to this whole contents and relevance and establishing that if you have valuable information, if you have unique information, and you use that to educate your clients, not about, hey, this is how you can use the product or the solution better, but really about what is the art of the possible out there? What can you really do? That's when you get to influence, right? That's when you get the trust factor and the influence factor. So one other thing, and you mentioned this, is the ability to be ever present. I think you have to be there when your clients need you. And again, 150 news coming out of one account per day. How do you do that, right? So that's something that sellers and marketers really, really seriously need to address, guys, because otherwise you're providing lip service. You're putting lipstick on a pig. You're not getting to the core issue. And at the end of the day, the core issue is you've got to be able to get those trainers. As you know, you use the word passionate. I 120% agree with that. No passion, nothing happens, right? Passion actually sometimes sells. Even, that's really what gets people excited, because it's something that goes from me to you very easily. It's an emotion.
Passion is genuine. Passion is empathy. And I think that's really important for
I
marketers and
fully agree.
salespeople.
Yeah, I have so many times coached salespeople, and when I see salespeople that are just going through the rounds of presenting versus kind of believe. You got to believe you're changing the world. If you cannot believe that you're changing the world with what you're doing, then
Yeah,
you're never going to come across.
yeah,
First thing a good sales maker, and I think you led us into this, is um, have that passion, have that desire. I think that's probably the most trait. And then don't go get fooled by some of these superficial trappings like travel, right? I'm going to be staying in a hotel, right? I'm going to be eating these meals. The reality of B2B selling is slightly, even though if you work for great companies, you get to great hotels and great places, it does. It wears off. And then you
quite
still have,
agree.
beyond that, you still have to get to the work, right? So um, yeah, excellent. Lois, how are we doing?
We
One
are
more?
great. So we would love to open the floor up for questions. And so to the audience, if you haven't yet, please feel free to drop a question to the panelists in the Q&A. We have two that have come in so far, so I can open with those, or we can give a few more minutes. Because Joel, before we started today's discussion, you mentioned that you might have a question or two for Usman as well. Is that right?
You've got to forgive me that I've skipped on that one, but I guess I want to. I'm thinking off the cuff because asking questions is my job, so I should be able to come up with something quite quickly. And Usman, I guess you alluded to we could have a whole separate. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say to Bob Apollo, who I know had said something about passion is best expressed through action rather than describing yourself. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bob. And hello, by the way. But Usman, you've got some very strong opinions about ABM. Clearly, do you think it's a bandwagon a lot of people are jumping on, and some of them maybe are nefarious is probably too strong a word for it, but not everybody on the bandwagon deserves to be there, I guess. Is that a good description of your opinion?
I would 120% support that. Yes, absolutely correct. I'll go so far as to say this, that it was a brand that kind of picked up steam. Almost 8,400 companies, anybody that has a sales and marketing solution is now an ABM vendor. Okay. So, and ABM is a unique B2B play. And it's not just a marketing play. This is where sales and marketing come together. This has to work. I've been at, in this role, Joel, before it was called ABM. I used to work at SAP, and they used to call this Premier Customer Network, where they used to look at their top 400 customers and kind of give them added service. And I'll tell you a few things, right? You do not sell to B2B companies by publishing content on banner ads, right? You do not sell by posting stuff on LinkedIn. You simply cannot. It's great that you do that. It's great for establishing your personal brand. Nothing wrong about that. But please, let's not confuse that with selling. It's personal branding. Very important check mark in a marketeer and a salesperson's roadmap. Very important, we give it, but mislabeled. Same way, ABM mislabeled in a lot of ways. Top of the funnel kind of activities where I have to go figure out or do prospecting is not ABM. You're selling to a segment of clients that are either already your clients and you're trying to expand the deal, or you're getting to net new where you can go for big whale fishing. And big game hunting requires a lot of prep, as we know, right? We can't just label every little, I'm never even going to get a ABM lead through a banner ad, right? Inviting somebody to my webinar is not ABM. That's demand generation. And so we've got to have a lot of clarity, Joel, and we can actually have a separate session on this. Like what's actually, I am actually having a webinar with Scott Gillum in about an hour's time on it's not ABM. And last thing I'll say, Joel, is that on this topic is that a lot of B2C companies or a lot of B2C concepts, which on paper look really, really good, do not necessarily translate into B2B. And so there's so many, I've got tons of examples of this. So we've got to be really cautious on what we call ABM is actually ABM. What is it that we're trying to do, right? So I think segmenting and kind of focusing on the core objective, coming up with a definition, and then coming out with what would be the core skills and traits, super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very wise words, Usman, and my threepenny's worth, Lois. If I have time, please tell me to stop if we don't. I think it's fascinating, and ABM has been a topic which has been really, really fascinating for us, both in the UK and our US audience as well. And I agree, it's not necessary for everybody, but I think it's such a welcome addition that people should have been talking about it always. Talk to people like some of the leading thinkers, Professor Malcolm McDonald in the UK. It's just that it's righting a wrong that we weren't talking on an account level for years. I think we should, and if we can get away from the fact that there is bandwagon jumping going on, it's valuable that we're actually recognizing that now, and we're doing our best to acknowledge it. And there's value that can come out of it. But I completely agree. It's not everything. It's not the be all and end all. And there is a lot of snake oil going on out there. But as there is in all kinds of marketing, we love a bit of snake oil in marketing, don't we?
Yeah, I will go so far as to say that even the nomenclature account-based marketing, I think there are two fallacies in there. Account. What is an account? It's a non-tangible entity. People. Account is people. At the end of the day, you're selling to people. These are collected together in buyer groups, right? So it should be, and people have personalities. So the term that we've started coining, kind of pushing out there, is personality-based marketing and selling. Because let's not forget, the goal is not just to get the attention. The goal is to close the deal and a bigger deal. So let's not undermine the most important aspect you got to close, right? And that's the sales piece. So personality-based marketing and selling is the direction. Go to the people. You talk about personalization. Let's put the person in the personalization. We can't just talk about it as a generic personalize this. Well, what does that mean? Personalize this, right? So I got to get into have some tools to help me personalize it, understand that. And just picking up on signals on social media is just not strong enough to do that. And so we should definitely do a double click on this, Joel. I think this merits a lot of discussion and a lot of collaboration on our sides as well, if you're like-minded about the objectives of what ABM is.
I think we've definitely got a lot of material, but we might need more than 45 minutes. That's the only problem.
We'll do it in a series then. Let's do what is ABM in the series together.
Sounds good to me.
Well, we will circle back on that after today's webinar, but we had a question from an audience member that Usman actually ties in quite nicely to what you just talked about the end goal, if you will, is closing that deal. And so Dave asked the panelists, how can salespeople play a part in creating marketing collateral so that the combined effort of both teams results in maximizing ROI?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, Joel, please do.
Yeah, Joel, get started.
I mean, I guess it's just at a basic level. It's including them, getting salespeople involved and finding out, first of all, before you start, what is it you use? What content do you use at the moment? What resonates with people? What do you think you're looking for? So understanding their needs, requirements, expectations, hopes, aspirations at the very beginning of that journey. And then going on the journey with them. So you produced it. What worked? How do they think of it? What do they think of it? What have you seen that's elsewhere? So instead of as a content writer myself, I think you've got to just be in the room with salespeople, literally as part of that journey about creating that content, and then get their feedback afterwards. Because and I think actually sometimes we covered this recently around table. it's not, salespeople don't always give marketers their volunteer that feedback or the right feedback. Sometimes marketers have to work that bit harder to actually get stuff that's actionable, but it's worth it for everybody.
Yeah, Joel, I like the fact that you suggested everybody has to get in the same room, because I think there's a disconnect in B2B marketing. A lot of work that marketing does, they believe they're doing some Ivy league level research and coming up, and then the sales guys are too dumb to be able to pick on the signals that they're and work on them. That's just absolutely not true. People who close, $100 million deals or $10 million deals are not dumb people. They're very, very smart people that can actually walk you through a full cycle. And so getting those two guys on the same page. Now, the problem, or not the problem, but the challenge at times is that how do you get the attention of your salespeople? So you've got to go as a marketer, you've got to go equipped with tangible, not some academic kind of recommendation, but real, hey, this is the person, this is what's happened in the industry, this is the angle of attack that I recommend. When you go in with that attitude that, look, we're partners, it's a symbiotic relationship, and ABM especially is a closed loop transaction. ABM is not we looked at this thing and we saw minimum 7 to 9 silos that appear from prospecting to closing a deal, functional silos. There's 16 technologies, Joel, 16 technologies on average that one has to navigate to go through those 7 silos. It's not happening in 2021. It's just outdated, right? It's the same thing that was happening. We've talked about re-engineering and thinking. It's the same paradigm. The paradigm is much bigger. The gaps are much bigger. The benefits are much greater. But you got to start working together. And salespeople will create excellent content, or will contribute towards creation of excellent content, provided they're given the right motivation. And the only way you get the right motivation is putting them in the same room and locking them up and saying, you got to come up with one output. Storm, norm, perform. That's what's going to happen.
Sounds good.
Wow, thank you both. We had another question come in from a gentleman named Mark. And so Joel, have you kick this one off? Mark asked, do you think newsletters are an effective content marketing strategy? And if so, what do you think can be included in the newsletters that generates the most engagement?
Newsletters should be part of a good content strategy, in my opinion, but not the be all and end all. There are other content. There are other ways of using content that's effective. And I think if you're doing newsletters, you're doing outbound, you should be doing inbound as well. That's kind of obvious. But also, so you need to make that content available, you share it in all the right places, but you also need to look at what other content is available. In the same way that Usman was saying, there's a huge wealth of content that's available, wealth of data that you don't have, that is out there in the market that you don't own. There is a whole load of great content out there in the market which you could use as part of your inbound and or outbound strategy to engage and gradually move people towards conversion. You just need to find the right mechanism to utilize it, to capture it, utilize it, and deploy it in the right way that is ethical and equitable all around. So yeah, I mean, I still think we're in a place where your email database is a very valuable asset to have, and the voice of the brand is really, really important, and to have genuine thought leadership in there is really important. Stuff which cuts through the noise is your own content, but I think there's also opportunities to be tactical, and particularly at a sales level, as Usman was saying, about using other relevant, resonant content which you haven't got the resources to deploy, because it's great that marketing is investing in content, but resources are finite, so we have to be sensible in how we deploy them.